So the internet broke yesterday with the news that Chris Jericho is going to appear on the Broken Skull sessions on the WWE Network. And we also got a tease that Andrade has signed a new contract with a new promotion. We talk about it all next on the Squared Circle Psycho Babble. My name is Michael Valenti. Joining me is Ralph Valenti. Ralph, the internet broke yesterday that Jericho is on the Broken Skull sessions, yet he's on AEW. So definitely a surprising bit of news, to say the least.
Yeah, and honestly, as we sit here right now recording, I still don't really know what to make of it. I don't know what to expect. I don't know what kind of conversation they're going to have. I have to imagine that even if AEW isn't mentioned by name, they're going to reference what Chris Jericho is currently doing in pro wrestling and in his career.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got to say, of the most recent interviews and podcasts and things of that nature, I think this is probably one that I'm looking forward to the most because, you know, when we start talking about forbidden doors being broken down, it's been a really, really long time since we've seen WWE work with another promotion at this level. You know, I know back in the day they worked with ECW a little bit. They had some guys come on Monday Night Raw. And granted, this doesn't mean that they're going to have talent on their premier shows like Raw and SmackDown. But this is the closest you're going to get to something like this, where you have a major promotion outside of the WWE, like AEW, that is on national TV, where they have their talent going over and being kind of cross-promoted, so to speak. So my level of intrigue is certainly up there, amongst other things. And yeah, I'm interested to see where this goes and what happens.
I agree. This is like, what are they going to talk about? Obviously, I think there's going to be some hints of AEW without possibly saying the three letters. Yeah, without saying AEW, I'm sure they're going to mention it. I'm sure they're going to mention why Jericho left WWE to go to New Japan Pro Wrestling. I mean, they've had New Japan Pro Wrestling footage on WWE television, whether that's NXT or WWE. So do they talk about Jericho's appearance on New Japan Pro Wrestling and his match with Kenny Omega and his match with Kazuchika Okada? You know, obviously they're going to talk about his career in WWE. Do they bring up parallels between the Monday Night War and the Wednesday Night War and the lack thereof for some people that think that way? It's definitely going to be interesting. And you brought up this forbidden door that everyone's talking about. Does this lead to more, or is this going to be a one-off?
I think there could certainly be more. I mean, this opens the door for guys like Christian, I think, and guys like Sting to certainly be guys that can go onto the show and have conversation with Austin. But I don't think you're going to get somebody who hasn't necessarily worked under the WWE logo to go onto the show. Like, I don't think anytime soon we're going to see a Kenny Omega or the Young Bucks or anybody like that go on to the Broken Skull sessions and have a conversation with Steve Austin and have it be promoted by the WWE. I think because Chris Jericho has such a long history within the WWE, something like this is a possibility. Now, when you look at Chris Jericho's body of work, right now, what he's doing is great. It's great for all the fans who want an alternative to the WWE. But his career has essentially really been defined by the success that he's had within the WWE. So because there's that connection, I think Vince is a little more open to allowing Steve Austin to do something like this. If it was Kenny Omega or if it was the Young Bucks or somebody like that, I don't think that we'd get the cross promotion. And I don't think that we'd even have a situation where Vince would allow it to be promoted or even allowed to happen at all. So I think because Chris Jericho worked within the WWE previously, that's why we're seeing something like this happen.
I'm glad you brought up Vince McMahon because there's some people, I posted something on our community page yesterday breaking the news of Jericho and Austin. And there's still some people out there that are like, wait, Vince McMahon allowed this? Like, he knows this is happening, right? And believe it or not, Stone Cold Steve Austin recently did an interview with Sports Illustrated and brought up this upcoming interview with Chris Jericho. And yes, Austin went to Vince McMahon. He texted him. He said, yes, can we do this? And Vince gave him the okay. And Austin actually double checked, was like, are you sure you want to do this with Jericho being in AEW, and gave him a thumbs up. So yes, Vince is aware. And Vince is going to allow Chris Jericho on the WWE Network despite being on AEW. And that just goes to show you, like, Chris Jericho still has a good relationship with Vince McMahon. So this whole thing about, former WWE guys just going and leaving just to trash WWE, it's not everybody. And Jericho, I think, is probably the one person who won't go on the Broken Skull sessions just to terrorize WWE.
Yeah, and I think that with Chris Jericho, it's inevitable in one way, one shape or form, he will be back in the WWE, because you got to think that he's going to be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. Now, when that happens, I don't know. I got to imagine that Chris Jericho is at the tail end of his in-ring career. So maybe 5 more years in AEW, unless he decides to work well into his late 50s or 60s. I don't see that happening. So when that time comes, he's going to be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, I'd imagine. He's going to be brought back, and that's likely where he'll end his career. So for right now, I think we can take a step back and enjoy what he's doing in AEW, but ultimately, I think all roads lead back to the WWE some way. I think that Vince allowing Steve Austin to do this and allowing Chris Jericho to go on his show also speaks volumes to Vince and his mindset and the way that he views AEW. I think Vince right now is essentially saying he's fearless in his older age and wisdom, because I think that he's seen threats like this come up before in the past, and I don't think that he's nervous about what he sees from AEW. He's seen in the past with the rise of WCW and ECW that, you can have guys like Hogan who are crazy over, but as long as you have guys that can be competitive and be edgy and all that other stuff, as long as you allow them to do those things, you can compete. So I don't think Vince actually fears what he's seen from AEW, especially considering when you have information like obviously Vince has access to the viewership and the ratings, right?
Right.
And you can look at those numbers and you can say that some of their biggest draws, Sting, you saw a bump there. Shaq is not a professional wrestler by any means. Instances like that you can point to and say, well, those guys are going out there on a weekly basis, or not even a weekly basis, but one-offs, and they're able to draw more than their top tier guys. Jericho's older, like we said, so he's not going to be there forever. Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, while what they've done can't be understated, but I don't think Vince fears what he sees in AEW, because he knows unless they can get somebody over to the level like a Rock, a Hogan with the NWO, an Austin, a Cena, they're not going to be able to compete, at least not for right now. So Vince is going to allow these things to happen, and I think it's just speaks volumes to the way that he actually sees AEW. I don't think he sees them as a threat in any way.
Maybe not. And also the fact that NXT is moving to Tuesdays, there's not this war anymore that I think, and I've said this a long time, fans created this Wednesday night war because they wanted something to root for, whether that's AEW or WWE. NXT's moving to Tuesdays now, so we don't have to worry about a war anymore. And maybe this is Vince's way of saying, guys, there's no war. Like, we respect what they're doing. They respect what we're doing. We're not going to counter program anymore. Heck, we're even going to have one of their biggest stars on our network, on one of the biggest shows that the network offers. And here's a big question. How much of this do you think helps with the subscriptions to Peacock, with, this happening during WrestleMania weekend? Obviously, WrestleMania is supposed to be the selling point, but this, for the diehard wrestling fan, do you think this helps bring in some of those fans onto Peacock, knowing that we've had already some problems with whether that's you can't pause or rewind live television, or people thinking they're going to edit out every little minute thing from the WWE Network or the Attitude Era? Do you think this will help?
I think that secretly there's a lot of closet WWE subscription people out there who pretend like they're not subscribed, and that they're just watching other promotions, and when something intrigues them, they're going to watch. But I can't say that, if I don't know, I guess we'll have to ask people in the comments section. If you're somebody who doesn't watch WWE Network or doesn't watch anything that WWE promotes, is this something that has you intrigued? I know if I wasn't somebody who watched WWE programming on a regular basis, this would be something that I go out of my way to listen to or pay attention to. Like when Kurt Angle's podcast came out, I went out of my way to find that. It wasn't on the WWE Network. I couldn't find it anywhere else that WWE was promoting, but I went out of my way to find it. And I think that something like this, as big as it is, because of given the situation, there hasn't really been somebody like this going on to Steve Austin's podcast, at least that I can remember. I mean, the biggest thing that could happen other than this, I would imagine if he got Punk on, right?
Right.
And I don't even know if that compares because Punk's not working for like a rival promotion or another promotion.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think that people are intrigued by this, and I gotta imagine people are gonna go out of their way to try and find it and watch it.
Yeah, I agree. I think while I don't think a lot of fans are gonna really bump the subscriptions with this, but I definitely think there will be a slight bump because of those anti-WWE fans or those pro AEW fans are gonna want to watch and see if they get Chris Jericho talking about AEW. And if the subscriptions go up, is that, because AEW drew in the numbers and just create this confirmation bias or whatever. But I also think when it comes to like the editing of the content, we've only known 3 cases so far, and all 3 are similar in why they got edited out. I think people are really exaggerating on what's going to get cut out. I mean, I watched WrestleMania 2000 recently, and you have the cat dressed up in a thong. You got all the hardcore, all the blood. So if you guys are worried about the Attitude Era getting completely deleted from the WWE Network on Peacock, take a deep breath. It's not going to happen. And if it does, it's on WWE, not Peacock.
Well, I'll tell you this much. Literally before we started recording, I was watching Anarchy Rules 99 from ECW, and it was not the same seeing RVD not come out to Pantera Walk. So...
Well, that's just copyright stuff.
I know it is, and I understand it. They don't want to pay for the rights of it, but he came out to some generic like Matt Riddle surfer dude type music, and it
wasn't even like Marilyn Manson's One of a Kind.
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry, you're right. Who came out to Pantera Walk then?
Well, he came out to Pantera Walk during ECW, but when he came to WWE, he was
theme. You got me all mixed up. Yeah, I'm so caught off guard and so disappointed by this that I can't even think straight. But yeah, it was I don't know, but there was still some good matches on that. Lance Storm had a really good match at the beginning of the pay-per-view, which was good. So
right. Before we go to our next bit of news here to talk about, though, I do want to let everybody know WrestleMania weekend is not just a big weekend for WWE fans, but also independent wrestling fans. And Fite TV is offering GCW's The Collective 12 shows between the whole weekend, which includes Joey Janela's Spring Break 5, Bloodsport 6, which is going to have Josh Barnett versus John Moxley, Effie's Big Gay Brunch, and Alley Cat's Real Hot Girl Shit, as far as other independent wrestling shows throughout the weekend. And we are now an affiliate of Fite TV. So we have affiliate links down below in the description for you to check out all those shows. So not only can you get your favorite independent shows for WrestleMania weekend, but you also help us support the channel at the same time. So everybody wins here. But Ralph, let's move on to our final bit of news that we're going to talk about. And that is Andrade. He was released the day after Fastlane. And everybody's been wondering, where is he going to go? Is he going to go to AEW? Is he going to go to Impact, Ring of Honor, New Japan? Well, it appears that he has teased that he has signed a new contract. On Twitter, he says new beginnings and the image of him signing a piece of paper. Do you know where he's going? There's no news yet on where, but where do you think he has signed?
I think that the most likely landing places for him are either going to be Ring of Honor or New Japan Pro Wrestling at this point. I'd like to say that AEW is an eventual landing spot. They've signed so many people recently. They got enough guys that are there. I'm sure that that's somebody that they want to get under contract. I just don't know if now is the time. So I think New Japan or Ring of Honor.
Yeah, I think it's New Japan. I really do. And here's why I think that. First off, he says new beginnings. Now, I might be looking way too much into this, but I'm pretty sure New Beginnings is a show that is done by New Japan Pro Wrestling. Also, Sunday morning or Saturday night, depending on where in the time zone world that you are, or Sunday night, sorry, depending on where in the world you are, New Japan Pro Wrestling is going to have Sakura Genesis. Genesis being the beginning. So perhaps that's another hint. I think it could be New Japan Pro Wrestling, and him joining forces with LIJ him being one of the originals of Los Ingobernables in CMLL. I think that makes perfect sense. Does he join LIJ with Tetsuya Naito and Bushi and Sonata? I think that's a really, really good fit for him. And I think his style of wrestling, I think fits better in New Japan right now than it does a Ring of Honor, an AEW, or an Impact Wrestling.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the way that there's matches for him there in AEW. I mean, I'm sure people would want to see the match itself with him versus Kenny, but realistically, are you going to bring him in to lose to Kenny? They're not taking the title off Kenny Omega for Andrade right now.
Right.
There's matches that are intriguing. Like I can imagine him walking out, and if Darby Allin intends to do this open challenge on a weekly basis, which mind you, that didn't happen this past week, did it? So
it did not, but it will happen next week.
I know. And I'd take that match over him against like JD Drake, something like that. So there's matches for him everywhere. I mean, if you're just somebody who wants to base him on his talents alone, go back and watch what he did in NXT. He's great. So I think as long as he goes outside of the WWE, he builds himself back up. Eventually, he can work his way to AEW if he wants to. But for right now, New Japan Pro Wrestling, there's probably some good matchups there for him as well. And his style probably complements that type of work better. So not a bad landing spot for him. That's the place he goes.
You talk about him leaving WWE and maybe making his way back to AEW or making his way to AEW eventually. But he did say recently that he kind of wants to have this Drew McIntyre-like comeback and go back to WWE one day. Do you see that happening in, like, say, 2-3 years where he runs the independent circuit, he goes to New Japan, maybe goes back to Mexico, maybe he does make a stop in AEW, but then he, works on his promo, works on a couple things, and comes back to WWE and has that Drew McIntyre-like run?
Yeah, and I think it kind of depends on a few things. If you believe all of the rumors, like Vince McMahon was down on him and you didn't think that he could be a top-tier guy, I mean, I don't know how true any of that stuff is. It's mostly just rumors that get spread on the internet, right? So if he's outside of the WWE for an extended period of time, it also depends who's going to be in charge at WWE. If Vince eventually steps down, he's young enough where, assuming Triple H is somehow involved with maybe some of the decision making, the best run that he had, like I said, was in NXT when Triple H was the guy in charge of booking and storytelling and all of those things. So you don't just forget those things. And more times than not, when you see somebody exit the WWE, one of the guys that they thank is Triple H. And I think that actually happened with Andrade as well. So I think it depends on a few things, but somebody as talented as that can actually have legitimate, really good matches and go out there and perform. Why wouldn't WWE want to bring him back if he can go outside of the WWE and find success and build himself back up? It'd be a no-brainer for me. So yeah, I definitely think that's a possibility.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, it's not the first time someone's left WWE or got released and then they come back and they actually end up being better than they were the first time around. Obviously, Drew McIntyre, the most recent example of that. Lashley. Yep. I mean, Lashley left and went to Impact and built himself up and now came back. His run initially wasn't that great, but obviously the last year with the Hurt Business was great. So it's definitely possible Andrade can do that. I think the only thing that hurts him right now is the language barrier because Vince has a problem pushing guys where English is not their first language. We've seen that with Nakamura. We've seen that with Andrade. I mean, the list goes on and on of these international superstars that are great somewhere else that focus on the wrestling, but in WWE, it's about the promo and the character. And if English is not your first language, it's not going to connect with some fans, and he doesn't care. He wants the best characters out there, and that's what hurts him right now. So perhaps he goes around and works on that and comes back and prove Vince wrong.
Certainly possible.
Yeah.
He's talented enough.
Definitely. So let us know what you think about Jericho going to the Broken Skull Sessions, what you think of Andrade, where he's going to end up in the comments below. Don't forget to share us all over social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at SCPB Podcast. subscribe, hit that bell for notifications to join the conversation. We'll see you on the next episode of the Squared Circle Psychobabble.